The story of a great flood that destroyed the earth was not unique to the Hebrews, who recorded it in the Bible. The Sumerians, who were earlier than the Hebrews, had their own version of a great flood. The Sumerian hero Gilgamesh traveled the world in search of a way to cheat death. On one of his journeys, he came across an older man, Utnapishtim, who told Gilgamesh a story from centuries past. In those days, the gods had brought a flood which swallowed the earth. The gods were angry at mankind, so they sent a flood to destroy him. The god Ea warned Utnapishtim and instructed him to build an enormous boat to save himself, his family, and the seed of all living things. He did so, and the gods brought rain which caused the water to rise for many days. When the rain subsided, the boat landed on a mountain, and Utnapishtim set loose first a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven, which found land. The god Ishtar created the rainbow and placed it in the sky, as a reminder to the gods and a pledge to mankind that there would be no more floods. So, the Greeks have a similar story, though it is slightly different. After Prometheus brought fire to mankind, we all know that story, hopefully, Zeus was unhappy with all of mankind for having the gift of fire. He was so unhappy that he decided to flood the entire earth, except for a righteous man named Deucalion, who he decided to spare. He told Deucalion and his wife to build an ark and take all the animals with him, after which he flooded the earth. But instead of populating the earth with sex, they threw stones which transformed into men and women. So, when we look at the European and North African regions, we see an undeniable similarity between these myths. The only differences in these stories are minute details, such as which pantheon of gods caused the flood, and how exactly the earth was later repopulated, and whether or not there was a rainbow involved as a promise to mankind. These are the types of details so far that we can see begin to form, and because the region is somewhat close, we can assume that cultures stole the stories from one another and gave their own spin to it. You would also assume that since the Asian cultures historically have had very little contact with the European cultures, the foundation of their religions would be very different. But after looking at some Asian flood myths, perhaps that is not so true. In Hindu mythology, the gods created Manu, the first man, who gave life to all humans. According to the legend, he was the earth's first king and the ancestor of all the kings of India. The most famous tale involving Manu tells of a great flood which destroyed everything on earth. One day, Manu was washing his hands in a bowl of water when he saw a tiny fish there. The fish pleaded with Manu to be placed in a larger vessel of water to survive. In return, the fish promised to save Manu from a great flood that was to come and carry away all living beings. Manu put the fish in a bigger bowl, but the fish grew so rapidly that he had to transfer it to an even larger tank. The fish continued to grow until Manu eventually threw it into the sea. At that point, the fish told him that he should build a great ship to save himself from the coming flood. He also instructed Manu to take into the ship 2 of each animal on the earth, as well as seeds from every kind of plant. When the flood came, Manu used a rope to tie his boat to a large horn growing out of the fish. Pulling the ship through the rough waters, the fish came to the Himalayan mountains. There it told Manu to tie the ship to one of the mountains and wait until the waters receded. After the flood, Manu became lonely because only he and the animals aboard the ship had survived. He offered a sacrifice and was rewarded with a wife with whom he began to repopulate the earth. Okay, do you get the point? Because there are a million stories like these in Asia and on remote islands. The Polynesians, they had the exact same story, and the story is simple. Worldwide flood, the gods or God are angry. They're going to send a flood to destroy the earth. So, a man and his wife and his family get on a giant boat with all the animals, and they escape the flood, and then they land and repopulate the earth. That's the story. I will provide a link in the description so you can see a list of all the different flood myths and their similarities. But once looking, you will be unable to deny the distinct similarities they have to the biblical account and Sumerian account of the flood event. My contention, of course, is that the reason this story has lasted throughout every hemisphere and throughout history of the earth is because it is quite possibly a true story, which resonated within people throughout the ages. So, of course, the next logical question you might ask me is, well, can you prove that there was a worldwide flood? The first thing we need to look at is consistency and inconsistency. New Science magazine tells us that there is heavy dialogue concerning the extinction of mammoths. Until about 11,000 years ago, mammoths, giant beavers, and other massive mammals roamed North America. Many researchers have blamed their demise on incoming Paleo-Indians, the first Americans who allegedly hunted them to extinction. But a new study fingers climate and environmental changes instead. The findings could have implications for conservation strategies, including controversial proposals for rewilding lions and elephants into North America. The idea that humans wiped out North America's giant mammals, or megafauna, is known as the overkill hypothesis, first proposed by geoscientist Paul Martin more than 40 years ago. It was inspired in part by advances in radiocarbon dating, which seemed to indicate an overlap between the arrival of the first humans in North America and the demise of the great mammals. But over the years, a number of archaeologists have challenged the idea on several grounds. For example, some researchers have argued that out of 36 animals that went extinct, only 2, the mammoth and the mastodon, show clear signs of having been hunted, such as cuts on their bones made by stone tools. I'm not going to read the entire article, but I will link it in the description. Further on, it reads that, nevertheless, given the large amount of megafauna in the Northeast, and the lack of evidence for human involvement in their demise, they argue that overkill cannot have been the only or even the major factor for continent-wide extinctions. Climate and environmental stresses must have also played a key role. So we're talking about 36 different species of animals which went extinct, and were either all hunted down by the human culture, which was called Clovis, or it was a result of some sort of climate change or natural occurrence. So if these 36 species of animals did not go extinct because of the Clovis, then what natural occurrence caused them all to go extinct? Could it have been a disease, such as the plague? If we look at the bubonic plague, the deadliest disease in all of human history, we can see that while it affected humans all over the world, that it did not affect certain animals. So that is a flawed theory at best. So what causes the sudden extinction of an entire civilization? Did they starve themselves to death? Because evidence already shows that the humans probably didn't hunt 36 species of animals to extinction. Evidence seems to show that it was a climate change, or a natural occurrence, or some suggest that a comet came and destroyed those species of animals, and that's what did it. So what are the other options? Is it possible that the natural occurrence which wiped out those animals also wiped out the civilization of humans? What sort of natural occurrence can wipe out all the humans and all the animals across an entire continent? The most powerful disease in human history was the bubonic plague, and while that disease affected humans all over the world, it didn't affect certain animals. The common elephant, for example, was immune. What if, hypothetically, there was a worldwide flood? Would that be enough to wipe out the inhabitants of a continent? It's either that or a comet, and both are just as drastic. The point of this video, of course, is to offer a point of view. A point of view which shows that perhaps these things are feasible. The rest is for you to explore and decide for yourself. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.